I never believed in anything that couldn't be explained. Strange noises, shadows, coincidences, I always reduced them to logic, to tired minds, and overactive imagination. But what happened in my apartment has stripped that belief out of me piece by piece, until all that's left is doubt, and something far worse underneath it. It started in the most ordinary way imaginable. I was in my bathroom, brushing my teeth, standing in front of the same mirror I had used every single morning for 2 years. The light was harsh, slightly flickering, nothing unusual. My reflection looked the same as always, slightly tired eyes, familiar posture, routine etched into muscle memory. And then I noticed something wrong. A thin shadow line behind the mirror. At first I thought it was just a gap in the wall or a cabinet seam I had ignored before. But when I leaned closer, I realized it wasn't part of the mirror at all. It was depth, empty space. My fingers moved before my thoughts caught up. I pressed the edge. The mirror shifted. Not much, just enough. A sound followed, dry, hollow, like something exhaling dust after years of silence. Behind it was a door. Small, too small to feel natural. Rough wooden frame embedded directly into concrete, as if the building had been cut open and stitched back together around it. There was no handle, only a slight indentation where a hand might press. I remember standing there for a long time, not moving. Not because I was scared, not yet, but because my mind refused to categorize what I was seeing. It felt like a detail that did not belong in my life, like a sentence written in the wrong book. Eventually, I pushed it open. The darkness inside was not normal darkness. It had weight. It felt close, like it was aware of being looked at. Inside, there was only one thing: a notebook. It lay perfectly centered, as if placed carefully for me to find. My name was written on the cover. My full name. I don't know why, but the moment I saw it, something inside me tightened. Not fear exactly. Recognition without memory. Like seeing handwriting you know belongs to you, but cannot remember writing. I took it out slowly. My fingers felt numb, detached from my body. When I opened it, the first page had a date and an entry, written in my handwriting. That was the first moment I felt the world shift slightly off balance. Not break, just tilt, because I had no memory of writing anything at all. And yet the ink was mine. The words were mine. And the date was a day I could not remember ever living. I didn't understand it then, but I was already inside IT.at first. I told myself it had to be some kind of mistake. A prank, a forgotten diary, maybe even something left behind by a previous tenant. That explanation should have been comforting, but it wasn't. Because every page I turned felt too personal, too specific, too mine in a way that didn't make sense for something I couldn't remember writing. The ink wasn't just similar to my handwriting. It was my handwriting, down to the small inconsistencies I only ever noticed when I was tired or writing quickly. And yet, my mind was completely blank where those days should have been, as if someone had taken a blade and carefully cut them out of my life without disturbing anything around them. The first entry was dated months ago. I remember standing in my bathroom, reading it over and over again until my vision blurred slightly, trying to force my brain to produce even a fragment of memory. Nothing came. No emotion, no image, no sound. Just an empty space where a day should have existed. And the worst part was how normal everything around that missing day still felt. My routine, my work, my apartment, all of it continued smoothly, as if the missing pieces had never mattered. It was like my life had quietly stitched itself together around gaps I was never meant to notice. As I kept reading, the entries became more unsettling. Short sentences, repeated phrases, warnings written in a tone that didn't feel like mine. There were mentions of sounds I couldn't hear, light that felt wrong, and a door I apparently kept finding but never remembering. Every time I read that line, something inside me twisted because I could feel the familiarity of it without the memory of it. Like déjà vu without the comfort of certainty. The notebook wasn't just recording events. It was documenting something trapped in a cycle, something repeating itself again and again, and somehow I was always at the center of it. Then came the entry that made everything inside me go cold. It mentioned a phone number, my handwriting again, and beneath it, 2 words, "Don't forget." I sat there for a long time holding the notebook, feeling my hands tremble in a way I couldn't control. It wasn't fear of what was happening. It was fear of how naturally my mind was accepting it, as if part of me already knew the truth but was being forced to stay quiet. Outside the bathroom, my apartment looked exactly the same as it always did, but suddenly I couldn't trust it. Not the walls, not the silence, not even my own memory of living there. And somewhere deep inside that silence, I started to feel it, the unsettling possibility that I hadn't just found the notebook. I had found it again, that I tried to step away from it after that. I really did. I closed the notebook and left it on the bathroom sink like it could stay contained there, like distance would somehow restore normality. But normality had already started to feel thin, almost artificial, like a surface layer that could peel away at any moment. I kept finding myself going back into the bathroom without remembering why I entered, standing in front of the mirror longer than necessary, staring at my own reflection as if waiting for it to behave differently. The apartment began to feel subtly wrong in ways I couldn't immediately explain. Not dramatic changes, not anything obvious enough to scream danger, just small inconsistencies that made my mind uneasy. A shadow that lingered a little too long after I moved. A sound in the hallway that stopped the moment I focused on it. The kind of things you try to ignore because acknowledging them would mean admitting something is not stable anymore. And I wasn't ready to admit that. Not yet. But the notebook didn't let me ignore it. When I opened it again, the entries felt heavier, like the pages themselves were carrying pressure. One entry described the light in the apartment being wrong again, as if light had a memory of how it should behave and was failing to follow it. Another entry mentioned stopping checking the time because it didn't matter anymore. I remember pausing at that line, staring at it for a long time, because I realized I couldn't confidently recall the last time I had noticed time passing in a natural way inside my own home. Days started to blur together in a way I couldn't justify. I would wake up, go through routines, eat, sleep, but when I tried to anchor specific moments in my memory, there was nothing solid to hold on to. It was like everything was happening in a continuous loop where only the surface details changed, but nothing truly progressed. And in the middle of those entries, there were repeated references to something I couldn't understand, a door at the end of a hallway. A hallway I didn't consciously remember having. That contradiction should have broken my logic immediately. But instead, it created something worse, curiosity. I found myself walking through my apartment more carefully now, observing it like it belonged to someone else. And that's when I noticed it. A corridor I had walked past countless times without ever truly seeing it differently. At the far end, where there had always been just wall or emptiness in my mind, there was now a door. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't announce itself. It simply was there, as if it had always been there, and I had only just been allowed to notice it. White surface, small metallic handle, perfectly aligned with the architecture of the building in a way that felt too intentional to question easily. I remember standing still for a long time again, feeling something inside me resist the idea of approaching it. Because the moment I acknowledged it, it felt like I was agreeing to something I didn't understand. But I still walked toward it. And the closer I got, the more I could hear something behind it. A sound that didn't belong in any apartment. Slow, mechanical, controlled, like breathing that wasn't coming from a human body. That I stood in front of that door longer than I should have. My hand hovered near the handle, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it immediately because something about it felt less like an object and more like a boundary, as if crossing it wouldn't just open a room, but would change the rules I was living under. The mechanical sound behind it continued without interruption, steady and patient, like it had been waiting for me long before I ever realized it was there. When I finally touched the handle, the cold hit me instantly. It wasn't just physical coldness. It felt unnatural, like the metal had absorbed something that didn't belong in normal temperature. My fingers almost recoiled on instinct, but I forced myself to hold on. The sound on the other side didn't stop. If anything, it became more aware, more present, like it had noticed I was finally acknowledging it. I tried to open it. It didn't move. Not locked. Not stuck. Just refusing. That realization made my stomach tighten in a way I couldn't explain. Doors are supposed to respond to force, to logic, to physical effort. This one didn't behave like part of the apartment. It behaved like something separate that only appeared connected to it. I pressed my ear against the surface. The sound became clearer. It wasn't random. It had rhythm, controlled cycles, like breathing regulated by machinery designed to keep something alive that didn't want to be alive anymore. And underneath it, I thought I heard something else, faint, distorted, almost like voices buried under layers of interference, not speaking to me directly, but speaking around me, as if I was not the intended listener, but still somehow included in the conversation. I stepped back slowly, my thoughts beginning to fracture between logic and instinct. My mind kept trying to label what I was experiencing as hallucination, stress, something internal. But the physical reality of the door remained unchanged. It was solid, real, existing in a place I had always assumed was empty. When I returned to the bathroom, the notebook was still there waiting for me. Open. I don't remember opening it. The next entry described the same door. It said I had found it before, multiple times. It said I always forgot after finding it. That sentence didn't feel like information. It felt like accusation. Like the notebook wasn't just recording events, but correcting me every time I failed to remember them properly. And then I saw something worse. A line that said, "We keep finding this and we keep forgetting." My vision blurred slightly as I read it again. Not because of confusion, but because something inside me reacted to it in a way I couldn't control. A deep recognition without memory. Like my mind was being told something it already knew but wasn't allowed to keep. I sat on the bathroom floor for a long time after that, notebook in my lap, the sound of the door still faintly present in my head even when I wasn't near it. And slowly, the most disturbing thought formed. Not that the apartment was wrong, but that I was not experiencing it for the first time, even though every part of me insisted I was. And somewhere inside that realization, something began to push back. A pressure building behind my thoughts, as if whatever was on the other side of the door was aware I had started remembering too much again. After that night, I stopped trusting silence. Even when everything in the apartment looked normal, I could feel something underneath it, like a second version of reality running quietly alongside the first, slightly out of sync. I would sit in my living room and try to focus on ordinary things, but my attention kept slipping towards small details that didn't feel stable anymore. The way the light stayed too consistent, never shifting naturally through the day. The way the walls felt slightly too still, as if the apartment itself was holding its breath. I stopped sleeping properly. Every time I closed my eyes, I had the sense that I might wake up and find things rearranged again, or worse, unchanged in a way that meant I had already been through something and forgotten it. The notebook stayed with me constantly now. I carried it from room to room like an anchor, even though I wasn't sure it was anchoring me to reality or pulling me deeper into something I didn't understand. The entries inside it had become more fragmented. Some lines were incomplete, cut off mid-thought. Others repeated the same phrases over and over, as if the writer was trying to force a message through exhaustion or fear. One line stood out more than anything else. "I always find it, and then something happens and I forget." That sentence started echoing in my mind even when I wasn't reading it. It didn't feel like information anymore. It felt like conditioning. Like something was trying to train my memory to fail at exactly the right moment. And then I noticed something I wish I hadn't. The handwriting was changing. Not drastically, but subtly. The same hand, but less controlled. Letters slightly smaller. Pressure inconsistent, as if whoever was writing was becoming more desperate over time. It made me realize the entries weren't just documenting events. They were documenting deterioration. But that's when I checked the notebook's last pages again. The final entry wasn't just describing the door anymore. It was pleading with me, telling me to call a number I hadn't yet dialed, even though it was written in my own handwriting. There was something about it that made me hesitate every time I looked at it, like my mind was refusing to fully process what it represented. But the worst part wasn't the number. It was the sentence underneath it. "Don't forget." I kept repeating it silently, sitting on the bathroom floor, trying to understand why those two words felt heavier than everything else in the notebook combined. Because it didn't feel like a warning from fear. It felt like a warning from experience. Like forgetting wasn't accidental here. It was part of whatever cycle was happening. That night, I stood in front of the hallway again. The door at the end was still there. And this time, it felt closer. Not physically, but like it had adjusted itself to my awareness of it. As if it knew I could see it now, and that changed something about its presence. The mechanical breathing behind it was louder than before. And for the first time, I realized something that made my entire body go cold. It wasn't just happening behind the door anymore. It felt like it was happening inside the walls around me. I didn't go to the door immediately after that. I tried to resist it, to pretend I could still live normally inside the apartment. but normal had already stopped meaning anything in a stable way. Every room felt slightly misaligned with the next, like I was walking through different versions of the same place without noticing the transitions. I would enter the kitchen and feel like I had missed something in the hallway. I would sit in the living room and suddenly feel uncertain about how I got there. Time was no longer something I was moving through. It felt like something that was moving through me instead. The notebook became impossible to put down. It wasn't just the content anymore. It was the feeling that it was actively responding to me. When I opened it, I often had the sense that I wasn't reading it for the first time that day, even if I was certain I hadn't touched it in hours. Some pages looked slightly different from how I remembered them. Lines that weren't there before. Words that felt newly emphasized. It made me question whether the notebook was changing or whether I was. Then I reached the final pages again. This time, I noticed something I had missed before. The entries weren't just warnings. They were instructions. Every mention of the door, every reference to forgetting, every fragmented sentence about the sound, it all pointed toward one repeated action, one unavoidable step. The phone number wasn't just a detail. It was a trigger, a connection, something that had been used before, possibly many times, to reach something on the other side of the system I didn't understand. I stood in my bathroom holding the notebook, staring at my own handwriting like it belonged to someone else entirely. My reflection in the mirror looked the same, but I couldn't trust it anymore. Even my sense of self felt layered now, like there was a version of me that had done all of this before and another version that was only now catching up to it. That's when I realized the door at the end of the hallway was no longer just a location. It was an outcome. I walked toward it again, slower this time, because something in me understood that avoiding it was no longer an option. The apartment felt different as I moved through it. Not changed, but aware. Like it was watching the same sequence unfold again and recognizing it. When I reached the door, the sound behind it had become unmistakable. Breathing. Not human. Not animal. Something mechanical, trying to imitate life. But now there was something else beneath it. A faint voice layered under the rhythm. Not speaking clearly. Just repeating something that sounded almost like my name. My hand moved to the handle without hesitation this time. There was no fear left in the same form anymore. Only a strange acceptance, like I had already crossed this point before and forgotten the result. The moment I touched it, everything inside the apartment felt like it paused. And I understood, suddenly and completely, why the notebook existed. Why the entries kept repeating. Why forgetting was necessary. Because whatever was behind that door wasn't trying to come out. It was trying to make sure I never left. If you made it this far, you shouldn't ignore what you just heard. Tell me in the comments. Would you open that door if it was in your house? And if you've ever experienced something you couldn't explain, I need to know. Don't forget to like this video if you want more horror stories like this, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one, because some doors, once found, don't stay closed. See you in the next one, if you remember.